Hello everyone, this is Ruby from the Useful Journal. I have another review for you today. It's the Primrosia Watercolour Journal. So it's a bit of a specialist journal. I have a website called theusefuljournal.com, and on that website I have journal reviews, and what's special about it is that I have very detailed specifications for each journal, and I also have links to other people's reviews of the journals so that you can look at everything in one spot. Primrosia designs are based in Sydney, Australia. They're actually quite near to me, which is kind of nice. There's not that many journal companies in Australia. They do ship from California. They have a few journals, there's not very many yet. It's specialty watercolour in that it's got actual cold pressed watercolour paper. It's 160 GSM. I'm not sure how that compares to the weights in pounds that we usually talk about for watercolour paper. They also have a black paper journal, and that is not watercolour paper, that is normal paper. You can buy them from Amazon and from their Etsy site, and the average cost, it's a premium journal, but the cost is comparable to, say, an Archer and Olive journal. When you buy the journal, it comes in a beautiful decorated slipcover. It's almost a shame not to use the slipcover because you spend most of your time using the journal out of it, but it is absolutely beautiful. The journal itself, the slipcover is quite lightweight as well, and it's a tight fit, so I imagine once the journal starts being used it might not fit back in the slipcover. The journal has a linen cover, and the company said they've chosen that because leatherette actually, while it's vegan, is a plastic, and they prefer to have a natural product. It's foil stamped and in a similar design to the slipcover. The company name is on the spine. It feels more compact than similar journals. It's quite tightly bound and pressed, and that affects how it sits. It lies flat with encouragement, and when I say that, you can see that the pages pop up. You can push them down and it will stay down pretty well. What that does mean though is that you can see it doesn't close flat. I've only used maybe 5 or 6 pages and it's already not closing properly. It comes in the slipcover wrapped in plastic shrink wrap. There's no other packaging. It has an elastic closure with quite a wide elastic. It has a back pocket, it has a pen loop, and it has 2 ribbons, satin ribbons, and they're a very good length, and they're not fraying at the ends yet. Looks like they might. But they are a very good length. It's very easy to pull them around. There is a return to owner page, which I always like. There's no other markings, there's no page numbers, there's no other, apart from the dot grid. Now the dot grid has small sized dots and they go close to the edges of the pages on all sides. There's more rows than, say, an Archer and Olive. Most journals seem to have about 27 by 39 dots. This one has 28 by 41 dots, and that's because it does go much closer to the edge of the page. The alignment is quite poor, but it's a watercolour journal. Perhaps you wouldn't be putting as many boxes in this one. But you can see, actually I don't even need to use my ruler because I can show you. You can see that my lines don't match up on all pages. You can see that there's quite often quite a significant offset there. That goes throughout the journal. It ranges from 1mm to over 2mm variations. So if you're looking for a journal that you want to have, if you're a very precise person and you like to have all your boxes lining up, you will find this journal a little frustrating because the dots don't line up. It has a lovely liner, and there is a quote on the back pocket, and this one says, "Surround yourself with what you love." There is a different quote on each journal. The exciting thing, because this is what we're here for. The paper is cold pressed watercolour paper. It's 160 GSM. It does contain some cotton. They haven't said how much, but they did tell me that it has got cotton in it. If you're into watercolour, then you'll know that that gives you a better result. Paper is an ivory colour, and let's compare it, say, to my Sequez journal, which is very white. You can see that it's definitely an ivory. It's a nice ivory. It has rounded corners on the pages and it feels lovely. Like, it's got texture because it's a watercolour paper, but it actually, when I first got this journal, I was so excited because it just felt really nice. We'll go to my pen test. It's the standard pen test I use for all my journals. I test a number of pens with different wetness of inks and different darknesses, and I test a whole lot of brush pens and really like popular pens and markers. Now, there is very light ghosting, absolutely minimal though, but you can see a shadow. And that stands for everything. So I would say it's not a problem. Like, once you write on it, you really wouldn't see it. Once you write on it, I'll see if that's happened. You see, once you've got stuff on the page, you just don't see it. It would depend on the pens you were using too. The Sharpie had exactly the same results as all the other pens, so, which is amazing. Like, an alcohol pen. It's only a very fine Sharpie. It's the ultra fine point one, but on my other journals, 160 GSM, it does show through, and there is exactly the same ghosting as there was for all the other pens. So very minor. No bleed at all, including from the watercolour. I do the test with the highlighter before and after text. Before text, no smudge, that's quite standard. There was a little bit of a smudge, write and then wait 10 seconds afterwards to highlight with a Pigma Micron pen. There was a slight smudge. Dot darkness is very much standard. I gave it a 3. Drying time, as I've mentioned with the smudging, was interesting. The smudging didn't change much depending on how many seconds you waited. Like, there was always a very, very slight smudge, but there was very little smudge even from 2 seconds. So I think with care, you actually wouldn't see much problem with that at all. The eraser was surprising. I use a 2B pencil and then a rubber to rub it out, and I made sure the rubber's clean before I start, and I had several goes at erasing it, and it came off okay. Like, you wouldn't see it behind your work, but it's definitely not clean. The whiteout, really bad result with the gouache for covering, which I was surprised about, and the correction pen didn't work that well, or the Signo, but the Jelly Roll worked really well, and it was a good colour as well. As I've said in other reviews, I tend to get a better result using whiteout pens on ivory paper than I do on white paper. Smoothness, it's a watercolour paper, it has texture, it's not a smooth paper, so definitely down the rougher end of the scale. And you really notice that when you use your fountain pens. I only use a packaged Pilot Prera fountain pen, not a nib. It's got a nib, but it's not a traditional nib fountain pen. And I found it rough with that pen, and you do get feathering, so definitely not a journal for fountain pen use, which is not surprising. Now, that texture on the paper also was noticeable when using mostly the brush pens that have a sharper point. So I hope I'm probably saying this wrong, but the Fudenosuke pen, the Fude pen from Tombow, has quite a sharp tip. Didn't feel nice at all to draw on this paper with that, and the same with the Pitt Artist pen, and also the hybrid gel pen just didn't grab the paper properly, and the same with the Posca paint pen as well. Those two, I had a lot of trouble getting the colour to actually go on the page. As I said, the paper has that rough texture. It would be quite hard on the nibs on your brush pens. It would wear them, make them get rough and feather. The coloured pencils look good, the result looks good, but I didn't really enjoy using the coloured pencils in it either. So it's interesting that going for the watercolour result really means that the paper may not be suited for some of the other things that you use in journaling. Having said that, I've used my Pigma Micron pens quite heavily in the journal, and they've been fine. There's no feathering, they're easy to write with in here. It was also good with the ink. Now on to the key purpose of this journal, the watercolour. Primrosia designs do specifically say that it's for light watercolour use. I didn't mention I'm using this journal as my memories journal. I'm just writing little anecdotes about growing up, and I paint a little picture to go along with it. And so it's just watercolour sketching really. So I did a little watercolour mouse here, and I've done all watercolour. These are all watercolour except for one ink drawing. It blends really well. It behaves like a lightweight watercolour paper. So there's good blending. You can go back and correct mistakes, which is nice, because some journals, when I've tested watercolour, you haven't been able to go back and change things because it's soaked too fast into the paper. It doesn't soak through, so this mouse I did with quite a bit of water, and there is definitely no soaking through at all. You can get a good depth of colour. Obviously this is sketching, so a lot of them are quite light, but you can see with the tractor, put a fair bit of colour on this chicken. The pages wrinkle a bit, but it's not bad. The only other thing to add is their environmental performance. Primrosia designs are looking into options, but at the moment there is no recycled content in the paper, and it's not FSC paper. It's not from sustainable forests. I imagine because it's a specialty paper, it's a bit harder to find papers that have those standards, but they did make a very conscious decision, as I said earlier, about the cover being linen and things like that, so there wasn't plastics. So overall, it's a beautiful journal. It's really lovely to use and to play with. It's very compact. The paper definitely works well with watercolour, and if you're looking for a journal that kind of sits in between true watercolour and a normal bullet journal with normal paper, this is a good choice. I have enjoyed my little project so far, and I'm going to continue. If you're a watercolour enthusiast, I would recommend this one and give it a go. And if you're Australian and you want to support Australian companies, go for it. Thank you, Primrosia. I've really enjoyed this journal, and I look forward to seeing what other products they come out with. Thank you.